All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Big Digital Energy. This is the first time in a while that we've had everyone here in studio. We got the mullet man, Kirk, back from Nantucket. Hey,
but let's have a quick moment here in your absence, just to make note of the fact that when Kirk and I did this solo, 2x the downloads of a normal BDE viewing. Just for the record,
have we verified this number? Mark, has anyone verified this information?
I don't believe it's unverifiable. They're never going to find the fact that I paid a bunch of bots to go do it, but it's all right.
It's fake news. It's bad data, whatever.
So Mark's been out. Where were you, Mark? Where were you traveling?
Tennessee.
So yeah,
20 degrees cooler.
Tennessee.
It's our first time all being in the studio. Everyone's back ready for business. So
take me to another place.
When Chuck's done singing.
All right. Business in the front, party in the back.
It's like a show.
I'm actually kind of upset that I saw the video of Kirk with his mullet and sunglasses. I thought that look should be permanent, not a one-time thing.
I mean, when it's 105 degrees and when I'm outside playing golf or doing something, it really is hot. That lettuce is hard to eat,
made an actual difference.
And I'm not that.
Vlad's quote was, "I sure hope Kirk didn't pay a lot for those glasses."
Thanks, Vlad.
Leave it to Vlad to talk some trash. All right, what we got this week in energy news? Who's kicking it off, Mark?
Just a little blur about this morning. TPH was commenting on something we've been talking a little bit. Is where are the stocks valuation wise? What are they reflecting? But they had a piece on Upstream Stocks in their coverage group and what implied price tag based upon where the stocks are or where valuation looks to be, and that's somewhere in the $60 to $70 range. Not kind of blinding insight, at least for this audience, but basically talking about how the market seems to be working past the demand concerns, the recession concerns, the kind of show me stuff we had been talking about a few months ago, and suggesting that if you believe we're in more of an $80 to $90 world, there's pretty meaningful upside from here in a group that's just now starting to play catch up with the rest of the market.
I actually want to ask you a question on this, Mark, because I was always a private company guy and never really understood public stocks and all. I'll say these as a statement, but really just a question for you is, whenever they would work backwards, it implies $60 oil or whatever. Implicit in that is some sort of valuation multiple or discount rate or something. And I always thought maybe they're getting the discount rate wrong now. It's just riskier. The discount rate should be higher. Maybe it's discounting 80 oil. So that was kind of a number one thought I had on the public stuff. And then the number two thought that I'll let you run with is, have we gotten to the point where public equities are such a small piece of the overall market? Shouldn't there be some selection bias in that if I believe in $120 oil, I should be able to buy the stock and there's not enough stock? So I guess where I'm going with this is it kind of shocks me. It implies $60 oil when you would think the bulls out there with the limited amount of supply should be dominating. But anyway.
Yeah, I think that's, we're still at 5-ish% of the S&P. I don't know what the precise weighting is that's dominated by, the majors and upstream companies for sure. But to get back to your point about, this derivation of price decks or what the stocks are discounting, at least in distant past practice, there wasn't much work done to update or modify cost of capital assumptions. That's one. The other thing that is usually the case, and I'm not saying it was in this case, is that everything else remains static. So you're not changing cost structures as you move prices up and down. And then there are those other factors that you raise that are, potentially certainly in the kind of phantom discounting, if you will, because of the risk, the different types of risks that are, kind of new to the sector and the way we think about investors thinking about oil and gas stocks. So,
because I would think the firestorm we went through over the last, call it, 5 years or maybe even the last 15 years, the day of reckoning should have hit that maybe we need greater returns to be an E&P than historically PDP, PV8, and PUDs for PV15 or whatever the valuation metrics are. But anyway.
Well, there's a lot of crosswinds now that you didn't have as an energy PM at some of these bigger shops that, you're not going to go to your CIO and stick your neck out if you've missed a bit of a move in the sector. If it's, back in the day when it was 3 to 4% of the S&P, it didn't matter. Right. So,
yeah. And where are you going to move the money if you still want to be in energy?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you put it?
Yeah. Because nobody's going to go trade commodities. I mean, you're not going to walk into your board and say, I need to post more margin on
that's right.
on orange juice
and
futures.
As we've spoken before, is those that actually have heavy trading arms, like the Shells of the world versus the Exxons, is they're actually traded at lower multiple. Now, some claim it's because they're listed in Europe, but many claim it's because of the riskiness of their commodities divisions because they're trading on margin. And so, what do you think, Mark?
Well, I'm going to not answer that question, but
I love that. Perfect.
I was
good analysis.
One of the single greatest things ever said.
Analysis from Mark.
One of the greatest single things ever told to me in my career is John Jacoby, the crusty old guy that managed all the Stevens family money. At one point, I was talking about going to a meeting. I was nervous and all that, and he goes, "Oh hell, investment banking is just the art of stating the obvious with an air of discovery."
I think that's a rerun on BDE, but it's a good one.
Yeah,
I've heard Chuck.
I've got 5 stories, guys.
Now I
times.
was thinking about something we'll talk about later, and it's not directly related, but it is in the same category, which is this notion of ESG factors and how investment decisions are being made, and whether or not certain stocks or certain sectors or subsectors of the investable bucket. And I think that has more of a pronounced effect even today than we like to think that it does, because we've seen quite a bit of pushback on this front, right, across the board.
Well, there's a few actually interesting, timely stories, Mark, that you're probably alluding to. One is the fact that the UN, the United Nations for some of us, are investigating Aramco and expect others to receive strongly worded letters because of how climate change is linked to human rights violations. So they've basically sent notice to Aramco. And not only did they send notice to Aramco, but they actually have written the United Nations have written letters to Aramco's key stakeholders, their banks, their partners, saying, we're investigating them for violating human rights because of climate change. And even though the United Nations is not a legal arm and there's really nothing that they can do legally to Aramco, it does send shockwaves and potentially opens Aramco for other lawsuits. So that's a pretty big story, I think. I've got another one to go right on top of that, but let's first just throw that out.
I just imagine Aramco getting the letter, opening it up, and just throwing it in the trash.
Well, they haven't responded. Apparently, the letter was sent on June 26th, and Reuters was just reporting on it, at least the story I picked up. And there are 4 unnamed quote-unquote experts on a committee or special working group that issued this letter of concerns. I don't even know if it qualifies after reading more into it as a strongly worded letter, but very quick to point out it's non-binding. Aramco hasn't responded, and it's unusual for the UN to do these things that target or address to companies and not nation states or countries. And so maybe because Aramco is a state, partially a state entity, it was, they've got the higher responsibility. They've said explicitly net zero. Aramco has said explicitly net zero by 2050. So I think this is the tip of the iceberg of more of the same coming for Aramco's peers, both on the NOC side and on the super major side.
But essentially, the probe follows a 2021 request by the UN Special Procedures Human Rights System which is I guess a subgroup within the UN, and it was really been spearheaded by an environmental advocacy group called Client Earth. So the UN is getting outside pressure from groups to go investigate these companies. Now, I think it's an interesting story, but at the same time, there's a great article this week in the Financial Times about investors warn fluffy ESG metrics are being gamed to boost bonuses.
Hold on. Back to the UN real quick.
Let's go back there.
Have they done anything in their history besides like produce a marginally attractive holiday card? I mean, they really do. They do holiday card great, you know.
Have you been
Best
to their
wishes?
Yeah.
But seriously. I mean, Iran is on the Human Rights Commission, right? Or one of their committees. I mean, give me a break.
That's what I think is funny is Saudi Arabia just imprisons people from other countries to come do very bottom of the barrel work for them, and we send a letter about climate change being
linked to human rights issues.
For human rights
not
issues,
the real human rights issues.
That's what you.
Yeah.
What did they do? Like get the letter and go cut off a journalist's head?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
right?
That's I find that to be posturing.
So it's interesting. At the same time, you've got the hand over here saying it's all climate change is linked to as a human rights problem, and Aramco is the biggest emitter. On the other hand, you've got all these ESG metrics growing. Now, as I've done some research, it's interesting. 3/4 of the S&P 500 have disclosed the influence of ESG metrics on executive pay, the people that make the decisions.
Yeah,
a rise from 2/3 in 2021. At the same time, profitability metrics are going down. So a great example, this is just the cream of the crop. At Southwest Airlines, CEO Robert Jordan's pay increased 76% last year to $5.3 million, by the way, even though the airline angered passengers by canceling more than 1,600 flights during the holiday season. So what's happening is if you're an executive at these Fortune 500s, you're getting paid more to hit these ESG metrics
than to be a good company,
even though your profitabilities go out. In fact, profitability metrics have gone from over 60% as part of their executive pay to almost 40% since 2015 to today.
I'm actually kind of surprised that the Southwest CEO makes only $5 million a year. I thought it'd be higher than that.
No, airlines don't make any money, and they're at probably the best run airline. But they've hit their ESG metric. They hit their ESG metric.
Yeah,
so
they
were.
They
Did they delineate what specific ESG metric performance boost or incentive boost that?
The problem is there's few, like actually speaking of, I mean, strike management, Vivek Ramaswamy's firm has been very critical because as I know, having been inside of one of these big beasts, ESG metrics are a total scam and fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is an ESG metric? There are many metrics. We could talk about them in specifics, but the reality is there are those out there, especially hedge funds that are saying, wait a minute, we don't understand what these metrics are. They're fluffy. Profitability is something you can track and you can earn.
Yeah.
But an ESG metric is like we hired, we're 90% diverse. We, lowered our carbon emissions.
Kumbaya 12 times this month.
And
That's
it's
right.
a moving target as well.
But what I know is like whatever you're paid to do, you're going to do. So
that's Charlie Munger. Show me a man's incentives, I'll show you his behavior.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, what Vivek and Strive have basically said over the entirety of their existence is very consistent that, the rules are that if you are a publicly traded corporation in the U.S., the trade-off for limited liability is a singular focus on shareholder primacy and profitability. And so we're starting to supplant that with this creep in
absolutely
non-financial and performance factors related to things other than profitability maximization.
So those stories are directly related. The UN, I mean, it's an interesting time that we're in because it's basically wealth redistribution is what's going on, and it's scary.
Well, it's also cottage industries around things like shareholder ranking and scoring. It's certainly the legal profession that specializes in this growing kind of mushroom cloud of I find the conversations with investors and with analysts who are increasingly, at least over the last 5 years, dealing with trying to sort through all this, I find those conversations to be no less ambiguous than they were 5 years ago.
Right.
There's not a lot of clarity. And it's kind of a whack-a-mole game or a moving target. And there's just not a lot of tangible specificity. Speaking to the ability to kind of, set easy hurdles or game the system, routine flaring, to use a specific upstream example. Fundamentally, why do you get paid incentive to reduce or eliminate your routine flaring that you shouldn't have been doing in the first place, right?
Absolutely. But let's go back to one of my favorite companies, Southwest, because Herb Keller was kind of a fan.
I'm total fanboy.
Because my dad used to drive to Dallas from Houston. He owned a business. He started a business, and Southwest really went after him. And at one point, Herb Keller, the CEO and co-founder or founder, he was one of the largest distributors of whiskey in the entire world because they gave whiskey as a promotion for flying Southwest. Now, I bet Herb Keller, who the only guy I've ever seen smoke inside of the McComb School of Business when I was at business school, you're not allowed to smoke in there, but Herb smoked at least 2 packs of cigarettes when he came and talked to our class. That guy must be rolling in his grave that the new CEO is getting a bonus for hitting some metrics about ESG while the airline profitability and anger to their customers are going way south.
I'd say even that's the bigger thing outside of their P&L is the user experience. Like over the last 1.5 to 2 years, everyone that was like super loyal Southwest flyers, I mean, you go there and it's flight cancellations and just the quality of customer service has gone down. So you spend generations, decades building up a brand and reputation like that and then just piss it away in 2 years is pretty
because this is important. To your point, the reason he was giving those bottles away is Braniff was the big airline. They went head-to-head with Braniff, and Braniff came out and basically said, we're going to cut the ticket price to $12 a ticket. Southwest ran the numbers, and they would be out of business in 6 months if they if they went from $18 to $12. And Herb actually came out and just did an ad where he just said, hey, I got to stick at 18. I can't match Braniff at 12. But if you like those guys being the only guy in town, fly them. If you want me around, I'll give you your bottle of whiskey.
Yeah.
And that was...
And my dad did it.
Yeah.
I want that bottle of whiskey.
I did.
Another bit of Southwest trivia. Why was Gate 1 at Love Field always the San Antonio flight?
Was that flight number 1?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't know.
No say.
Because when Herb started the airline, it was headquartered in Dallas, but he lived in San Antonio, and he never moved. So the first gate for his commute was the first gate at Love Field was the flight to San Antonio.
Nice.
That's interesting.
One last Herb fanboy thing. So
I don't know. We were
Yeah,
Southwest historians here.
Big consumer
tie this to
of
jet
energy,
fuel or
big
something.
Big consumer of alcohol. I mean, they go together, right?
Exactly.
And you probably used to smoke at some point.
I never did. I have nicotine withdrawal. So like if you give me a cigar, like 30 minutes later, I'm puking. But anyway, no, this was great. So there was some brouhaha where they changed the name of their frequent flyer program and they didn't have the copyright on it. And some trucking company or something had the rights to it. And for whatever reason, a lawsuit happens and Herb finally hears about it. Like, what the hell's going on? It's like, well, we kind of use this name. This guy has the name. We think we can use it for being an airline and not a trucking company or whatever. And Herb calls the other CEO and says, hey, we screwed up. I'm really sorry. Can we arm wrestle for the name?
Yeah.
And the CEO's like, are you serious? He goes, yeah, let's just arm wrestle for the name. And he went, wink, wink, nod, nod. I'm going to lose. But there was so much publicity about it. Herb was training by smoking 3 packs while he was doing it. Comes out, they have like the Rocky theme song playing. He loses. They change the name. But the free media he got from just handling it that way.
That's it.
Guy
Elon,
was a
Elon
legend.
Musk
He was
has
a
taken
man.
that.
He was a man.
Elon Musk has taken that playbook with his fight against.
I mean,
Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
he's a man, dude.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Speaking of Elon, X, did y'all see this Twitter post I made the other day about the wildfires in Greece? Y'all see this?
It's
No.
the arsonists are.
Aren't you mixing terms there? Twitter
wait.
post.
It's arson, but the arsonists wouldn't have started the fires if it wasn't for climate change. Is that where you're going?
So BBC News puts out this news article, and the headline is Greece wildfires, 79 people arrested for arson. And then you get into the article, and it's got some quotes in there. So listen to this real quick. All right. The quotes said that arsonist scum are setting fires that threaten forests, property, and most of all, human lives. Mr. some Greek name, Kiklias. I don't know how to say that.
Sounds like a Greek god.
It's a Greek name. Told Greeks during a televised emergency briefing on Thursday, "You will not get away with it. We will find you and you will be held accountable." So that's quotes from a Greek official. And then this BBC article right under it says, "Summer wildfires are common in Greece, and scientists have linked the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, including heat waves, to climate change." I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do with 79 people that they've arrested already? This is a a coordinated group that's got conspiracy to set wildfires. And are we at the point now where we're seeing attempted arson in the name of climate change? And you would think, like, on surface, you're like, hey, climate cult isn't that brash. They're not going to do that. But honestly, I don't put anything past them now. I mean, climate terrorism has been a thing. There's been blog posts and podcasts of how to blow up pipelines and things of this nature. Is this something that we're going to keep seeing, is forest fires being set on purpose to illustrate the point of climate change, which, just for everyone's knowledge, I mean, forest fires can happen regardless of dry vegetation or wet vegetation. I mean, fire's fire. What do y'all think? Is this like the new trend, climate terrorism, starting fires?
Well, I'm convinced by you reading that AI helped write the BBC article, so that which used 5 watts, which now tells me BBC they're not
net zero.
Yeah, they're not net zero. Those bastards.
Yeah, the
versus 1 watt.
This wasn't the first. There were some arson-related arrests simultaneous with the Canadian fires.
Yeah,
earlier in the year.
I guess I'm just like blown away by the amount of people that they've arrested. 79. I mean, that's a coordinated effort.
That's a coordinated effort for sure.
That's not.
It's a gaggle of people.
Yeah, it's not isolated. It's not isolated people and coincidental timing and effort of starting fires. I mean, 79 people is that's half the people that come to an energy tech night. That's like that's a good sized amount of people. So, I don't know. The Greek official appreciated his response in attacking the arsonist directly, but then this BBC article, like, just nonchalantly throws out this
By the
piece
way,
about,
since you were a young man, have you seen the movie Quest for Fire?
No.
All right, so now we get fires all the time now. It's like, it's obvious. You can buy a lighter in a grocery store. But this movie, before there were tools, back in the old days, when it was just cavemen running around, it was all about the quest for fire, because the only way they knew how to make fire was when lightning struck and something burned. So
yeah,
you got to go back. This is an exercise for all of us. Go watch Quest for Fire. Great movie.
Is it an old movie? Is that why you asked me? Because I'm young?
It's so old, I don't even think there are
Colin
two
doesn't
guys
do
next
old
to me.
movies.
You know what it is. They're like, what is that?
Quest for Fire. I've never heard of it. Well, you know what's interesting about that is that, I mean, there's been periods in the Earth's history where the entire world was on fire. I mean, way before humans got here, and maybe it was a result of climate change. And climate's changed for a long fucking time.
When Chuck hit middle age, I think it was in the 70s. They used to in that decade, they were talking about it was going to be the Earth was going to freeze.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually
the Ice Age was coming back.
I was going to send that in a tweet today. Is humankind going to live with climate anxiety for the rest of human civilization, because the climate will always be changing. Always has, always will. And, maybe we find ways to reduce CO2 and man-made emissions and second order effects and climate change. But even if we do that, the climate changes. And I don't think we'll ever have the ability to control the climate.
I like Chuck's point. You said something to me last week that I was like, that was pretty profound.
In the episode that was so highly rated?
That's right.
Okay. What did I say that was so profound?
Well, I think you said, show me data that proves climate change and show me data that doesn't prove climate change. Show me how weather is actually has changed.
That's always the thing you ask. Oh, this data means climate change is happening. Hypothetically, tell me the data. What would the fact pattern look like if we didn't have climate change? And everybody's like, well, I don't know. And I go, well, then you can't have one side of a coin, right?
Yeah.
If data proves it, great. Show me what the case would look like.
Chuck is an investment
well,
banker.
and that's that's pointed out by many others. Vivek and Strive that we talked about earlier. Alex Epstein has talked quite a bit about the positive ledger side that is never accounted for when we go through the negative consequences of fossil fuels as it relates to emissions and climate change.
And even forest fires we put out now. We have the capability
Right.
of putting the fires out way back in the day. I mean, they have forests that burned all to the ground, before
I want to hear some tinfoil hat shit that just popped up in my Twitter feed. It says DARPA research investigated how to weaponize fires all over the world, including in Greece. And they put these schematics from DARPA on weaponizing forest fires.
Really?
I just thought it came from a laser beam from a satellite.
The dark side of the moon.
I've seen weird. Was it weird? Not Weird Science. What was the one about Caltech? Great movie.
Real genius.
Real Genius. Wasn't that a laser beam that
Oh, that was a big laser beam.
that created a fire?
Dude, anytime you talk about laser beams, I'm intrigued.
That's what we got to get to wake him up.
Laser beams and aliens.
Speaking of anxiety and laser beams, we've talked last week about the EV stacking up and the problem of EVs.
Yeah.
Y'all heard about this? We have some data, right, Mark?
Yeah, by the way, I was on last week. I just wasn't here. So
Well, we know, but
Mark's feeling a little left out.
Mark wrote that line 12
Mark will be here.
seconds
Mark
into
will be
this
here
episode.
3 hours early every week to make sure. What's the data, Mark? What do we got?
And wrap in there how your picture's never on the... Go ahead.
we need to retrain that model. Business Insider had a piece out on just generally what's happening at the dealer level with respect to EVs. Customer demand is cooling. We have direct experience among the panel here on BDE with reasons for cooling customer experience, despite the fact that your EV was probably in a little bit different stratosphere. But nonetheless, Kirk, you and I were talking about for the show that, dealers are the leading edge. And there's this growing tension and friction between the automakers themselves and dealers because the automakers are incentivized to keep cranking out EVs and the market's saying no in a lot of cases or pushing way back. So inventories are building. One interesting data point earlier this summer or going into the summer, dealer inventory for all vehicles measured about 54 days. If you parsed out EVs, that number of inventory duration was twice that. So as a recent EV owner.
Did you read anything in there about price data? Have we seen them starting to slash prices on it yet? And selfishly, I'm asking because the girlfriend's talking about going and getting a new car.
Well, there's a couple problems. I know from this article and a few others is that some dealers are refusing inventory until they can move the existing inventory.
Okay.
But the dealer model, unlike Tesla's we talked about, they don't make a lot of money. So they're not slashing prices at this point, but they're sort of stuck in a sort of like, we're going to move other cars to make money and we're going to try to sell these EVs. And they're realizing, this is coming from the dealers, that there's this shift in demographics. Like all the early adopters that bought the premium cars have sort of we've hit that. Now it's to the mainstream, to the mass adoption level, which there's an interesting article, Bloomberg, about the 5%, the magic 5% number, which I'll talk about. But the answer is that's coming, but there's no supply of EVs that maybe your GF wants that sort of fit her mainstream mentality if she wants a good deal.
Well, because I mean, and these numbers are somewhat dated because I haven't looked them up recently, but we sell about 7-8 million cars a year in America. Now that's pre-pandemic type stuff. 6 million to 7 million of those cars were $45,000 and cheaper.
Right.
So that's your 5% number right there. It's until we had an EV that was functional, blah, 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 below 45,000. It was going to be the land of rich people.
So if you recall, we talked about last week, the Vietnamese
was Mark here last week?
5-seater competitor. I was here virtually. 5-seater competitor was priced, I think, somewhere like $1,200 to $1,500 over the Tesla Model Y was its direct competitor. But the difference with the Tesla Model Y and I forget the name of the Vietnamese manufacturer. I did see their stock was up like 40% this morning. I don't know if that's come back, but the difference in the Tesla Model Y and the further advantage it has is that it meets the criteria of the Inflation Reduction Act. So there is that $7,500 give back or rebate.
Car dealership guy on Twitter had this tweet, and he said, I'm on a call right now with an exec from a multi-billion-dollar automotive company. Asked him about electric vehicle sales. His response, Tesla's the Apple of EVs. Everyone else is Android. He said, let's keep it real. Customers that come in specifically looking for an EV are buying a Tesla 99% of the time. The rest don't give a shit whether their car runs on electric, coal, or wind as long as they can afford it.
Yeah,
that's an interesting analogy.
I mean, your specific case was the aggravation of a lot of things, not the least of which was range anxiety, and you could never get access to
lack of convenience
a super fast charger.
That's
There's
right.
not enough of them, and they're all taken up by crews. You arguably have a little more flexibility in your day to day than somebody who's depending on.
Because they don't have a real job. Thanks,
we all do.
Thanks, Mark.
None of us do.
Yeah.
But that being said, if I'm critically dependent upon something being charged and ready to go that gets me to work, or the consequences of getting fired if I don't get there, that's an order of magnitude greater kind of
Absolutely.
There's a book called Crossing the Chasm, and it talks about how you have your early adopters and products, and it really, the cover is just a normal distribution curve, and you can always get early adopters, people using the product, but actually getting over that hump to the mass market is a different iteration of product adoption. And I look at my neighborhood. I was thinking about this the other day as I was walking, because there's this little subset of my neighborhood where my house is, and there's probably, call it 30 other houses. And none of the houses have an EV except for one house. And this guy's got an F-150 Lightning and one of the Rivian SUVs. Like, his fucking garage is decked out, $200,000 worth of
let's go over
EVs. And so you got that one guy that kind of compensates for the rest of the neighborhood, and everyone else has gas pickup trucks. And I live in a neighborhood that's, upper middle class, well diversified. And so I look at it as a pretty good sample set, at least in Houston, of kind of what the future looks like for people in the burbs. And right now it's all ICE vehicles.
Well, there's some, we're seeing, so dealer inventory is real. We're seeing that the stock up, they're not taking, a lot of them are refusing to take more EVs. We talked about the fact that, crossing the chasm, that the price point's still too high.
Yeah.
Prices need to fall. There's range anxiety, which is a real issue, and there's increased costs that, as we're heading into potentially a big recession. So the economy's we have inflation. Things aren't going great. If you're dependent upon a car to get to work every day, this is not necessarily a smart choice.
Yeah.
And Bloomberg had some interesting their analysis and forecast is, once a society, a state reaches 5% penetration of EVs, then the adoption of EVs is almost like it's a step function change in growth. The U.S. reached over 5% in 2021. So we're already above that. Now, their analysis is, well, when products like mass adoption products like the microwave hits 5% adoption, then everyone gets one. Well, guess what? The microwave, I remember because when my dad gave my mom a plastic microwave as a joke one Christmas, that was uncomfortable for the whole family because she was so mad. He went on a week later and bought her a new one, but a real one. But microwaves were expensive. But microwaves fell in cost. But a cost of a microwave is very different from your second or first largest purchase.
Yeah.
So Bloomberg's saying, hey, when you see products hit 5% adoption, then the whole market's going to buy it. I'm like, well, cars are a much different thing.
But what did microwaves replace? Like what were they replacing?
Toaster ovens.
A lot of us used to have these things called gas ovens, but they're now electric. We'll talk about that. It's different.
But it's not.
It was arguably better performance.
Yes,
it was more time.
That's not even what it was replacing wasn't even analogous. Like we still use ovens today, right? But like a microwave was a new type of technology and concept. Like it was a material step change in function. So I don't even see it as like replacing something.
The electric vehicle's not replacing.
It's not
replacing. It's a competitor.
Yes, it's a competitor. It's not replacing.
And EVs have a different framework from kind of the physics problems you're trying to solve or the physical world problems you're trying to solve that something that's more simplistic and straightforward as a microwave doesn't. The physical world around mining and metallurgy.
Absolutely.
And infrastructure and all those things, I'm a bit skeptical of, the proponents of an S-curve type of profile happening with EVs just because the physical world has proven time and again that it doesn't work that way.
And this hasn't hit the consciousness of thought on it, but I truly believe this. Power prices are going to double or triple over the next 5 years. They just are.
Have to.
There are.
We've talked about the grid constraints.
Yeah.
We've talked about all of it. I had Tim Kramer on the podcast. We talked about it. I mean, power prices going up. So it's not even going to be I can have a payback because I'm not buying gasoline.
I don't
Damn, wait a minute.
Not there
you
anymore.
heard it here, bro. You heard it here.
When power prices increase, just the price of energy increases across the board, right? And so I've never looked at it like, I don't think that it's fair to look at it as like, I'm going to get my payback from using electricity over gasoline. I think that's a very poor argument. But,
it was real at one point. I mean, you could look and actually see dollars doing it. But
And Jigger actually wrote an article on this, which was interesting about like electricity versus gas. But I think the point was.
But I think that's a short-term arb, essentially. Like I don't think that lasts over long terms. And so, when I look at EVs, I think EVs can win part of the market based off of being a better product than ICE vehicles in certain situations. Like, for me, I could get away with an EV all day driving back and forth from work and charging at my house overnight, no problem. But even still, like I bought a new vehicle last year. I bought a fucking Toyota Camry. Why? Because, hey, price point, I know it's reliable. Go down the list instead of, pinning or, really ponying up and buying a Tesla or an F-150 Lightning. Like it's hard to justify buying those things right now. If you're looking at it from a pure pragmatic, I need to use a vehicle to get to point A to point B, like it's hard to justify buying an EV over some gas cars.
And I will say this, and I won't belabor the point, and I won't go on my diatribe like I normally do about it. At the end of the day, the breakover point on the carbon footprint is not like a 1-year payback. Go to the Volvo website, read the 150-page report. They're talking, 75,000 miles is the breakover. That's, 3 to 5 years.
It's hard math.
That's 3 to 5 years. So we're going to spend trillions to do all this for 3 to 5 years. Yes, marginally better for the climate, although people could argue it's not once you get into disposal costs, all that. But it's not a no-brainer.
And here comes Utah, Oregon, and maybe Michigan saying we're charging
I won't even
tax
say,
per mile.
I won't even say that, but when I was moderating my panel at Koga, we had an extra 3 minutes, and I said, "They're tracking you." I
saw an interesting point.
Not allowing any more copper mining. Right.
Yeah. Lay that on us. That's a good one.
Hold on.
That's actually a good
Before you
story.
get into that, I want to talk about tires on EVs real quick, because I saw an interesting point a few days ago that someone brought up. Like, I've already known that a lot of Teslas will burn through tires just based on the weight of the vehicle and the profile of the tire. But one thing I didn't think about was the lifespan of tires on EVs is shorter because people are finding newfound lead foots with the torque and acceleration. Yeah. So they're speeding everywhere and just wearing out their tires. And so I just think that's a super interesting point of like tire churn.
It's like when people buy those little sport bikes, motorcycles, they figure out, they start going like 90, 100, 110 until they die. But
because I mean, the point that people always find fascinating that I say is, the amount of energy stored in a barrel of oil weighs about 300 pounds. That same amount of energy stored in lithium weighs 20,000 pounds. And that's just God. God made that when he or she started the earth. And that's just that.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
All right. Take us to Alaska.
Back to the physical world constraints. This deals with copper mining. Doomberg came out, I think it was last Sunday.
It was.
There's been another one since, but this one was titled Pebble Beached, and it was named after a proposed mining development in upstream of Bristol Bay in Alaska, which you can imagine is a very sensitive area for good reason, both marine and freshwater streams and salmon fisheries, et cetera. And so this has been a multi-year battle with a lot of opposition to developing the mine. And ultimately, it was killed at the federal level by the Biden administration. So, and Doomberg even admitted, said, look, if we lived there, we probably wouldn't want a copper mine in and amongst our natural beauty and habitat. But the interesting really domino effect of this, they then talked about the difficulties that are emerging in Chile and Peru, both on the cost and delay side, but also the political and environmental opposition side, which has then caused a further domino to fall, where now the Democratic Republic of Congo is going neck and neck with Peru as the number 2 copper producer in the world. And we all know, because we've talked about the cobalt issue in Congo, that mining there is kind of hands off by U.S. and Western companies for a lot of reasons, not the least of which are Foreign Corrupt Practices Act,
China's there,
violation,
and we buy from China.
And China has predictably swooped in over the years and secured a lot of the mineral rights, including copper, by investing billions of dollars, because they really just keep churning straight ahead to dominate raw materials. Copper is just another in the chain of things that need to get sorted out if we're really going to hit that S curve of adoption of an electrification of a lot of things, including EVs. So
as ran by the man himself.
No, I mean, and at the end of the day, I mean, we need to be intellectually honest and consistent. If we're going to mandate electric vehicles, we sure as hell ought to mine for the stuff in the United States, Yeah. I mean, we're going to be in real and I used to be the biggest free trader on the planet, so protectionism was the evil word and all that. You go through a pandemic where you can't get medicine, you can't get freaking toilet paper.
No, that was kind of
because
crazy.
We're buying it out of China. I'm willing to pay a little bit of a higher price to do stuff here and have some protectionism.
Yeah, it's funny that our grandparents, great-grandparents kind of built up this mindset and mantra of built in America or bought in the USA, and that didn't really carry over to like my generation, for example. But then you get in COVID and all of a sudden supply chains were wrecked for a long time. Like, going to 2021, 2022, you still couldn't go in the stores and, get certain electronics and things of that nature, and kind of puts it in a perspective of how fragile supply chains are, and you become dependent on one country for something.
Yeah.
Puts you at risk. So one quick thing I wanted to talk about before we get to the end of the show, something exciting in energy, exciting to me at least, is that last week, Texas had 2 virtual power plants that kicked on and started diverting energy to the grid. So this project in Texas is called Aggregate Distributed Energy Resource. The acronym is ADER, ADER. So there's currently 8 resources referred to as ADERs, and right now there's 2 of them that have qualified and active. There's one in Dallas and there's one in Houston, and says that the bundles have to be less than 1 megawatt. So to put that in perspective, that could be anywhere from 300 to 600 homes. And essentially the way that this works is if you have battery storage at your house, you have like the Tesla battery Powerwall. ERCOT will either, I don't know if ERCOT's doing this. I saw PG&E and Tesla do this, where PG&E text all the homeowners at noon and said, hey, we're expecting peak demand tonight at 6 p.m. We're going to charge your batteries right now, and then we're going to draw that power later and pay you a premium for it. Not sure if Texas is doing this exact thing, but regardless.
What I saw in one of the articles, and I may get this wrong, but it was something like, we'll pay you X dollars per month for us to have control of your batteries.
Oh, okay. Maybe so, yeah.
Either the local utility or maybe it's ERCOT directed.
Yeah, I'll have to look up what the incentive plans are around that, but still pretty cool, because I think that the future is having these virtual power plants, and especially homes, if you have solar and you have batteries and you have electric vehicle battery capacity, and maybe you have a nat gas generator, all of a sudden you're running this little mini power plant that can put power back into the grid. Even like we were talking about diesel generators earlier, like, say that there's peak demand on electricity and you got a nat gas generator that's hooked into gas lines, kick that thing on and send electricity back into the grid.
I mean, I've had gas generators for every house. It doesn't make financial sense as an individual to run on gas prices. The only time is if the grid incentivizes, which is not a word I know, but incentivizes you, individuals, by paying what it would cost if the grid went down. So you need that frequency regulation or however demand regulation. Yeah. You need individuals to be paid extra premium for that. And I think that should include, there's a lot of natural gas generators here in Houston. Turn those suckers on.
Yeah. Think about how many megawatts you can produce with
when you make me head of ERCOT, and I'm showing my fuck you, fuck this shirt, so I'm disqualified. But probably the thing that needs to happen, because I almost invested in a company back in the late 90s when I was with Stevens, and they created inverters that allowed, in effect, back then it was a diesel gen set that you had for backup power, would allow you to sell that electricity to the grid. They never made it, unfortunately, but the pushback was always the owner of the wires saying, "Hey,
Centerpoint in this case,
you're gonna blow this all up if we allow people to do that." So, as head of ERCOT, I will create an engineering commission, and the presumption is that any individual with generating capacity is going to be allowed to sell to the grid, unless this commission says no. The default is the science works, the engineering works. Come on, guys. And then the second thing I'm going to do is, and I don't know if it's probably not 100% of either, but it's a little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick. Hey, if you're rich and you have a natural gas gen set, I'm going to be able to kick you on, Monday at noon and turn you off at 9. You get a little bit of a property tax break for this or something. But there's no reason to be out there not utilizing the generating capacity we have. Software will be able to figure all this out.
Yeah.
And I just learned that I've never owned a Generac, that they go through a normal or a regular exercise cycle
once a week. Mine always does.
So what are you doing with that exercise generated power? Is it just go to waste, or?
Yeah, you burn it. You just make sure. I mean,
so if you had capacity for storing that, think about all the Generacs that are out there.
Absolutely.
Exercising.
But in Houston, it is. I mean, until the battery prices still come down, it makes sense to have natural gas gen set backup.
Oh no, 100%.
Because number one is natural gas almost never goes down. There are exceptions, as we found out a little bit over a year
The
ago.
pipeline's buried.
But the pipeline's
wires
buried
aren't.
and it runs. So
I think Chuck's always got a good story about this. So he talks about his dad spent all this money on getting solar and battery at the house, and Chuck is busting his dad's balls saying, you're never going to get payback on this. And then Winter Storm Uri hits, Chuck loses power at his house. He has to go bunk up at dad's house. And, there's a premium that you'll pay for self-sovereignty and being able to have
12.3 year payback. Don't sound so bad right about now.
That's called the emotional return or the emotional hedge.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I think that when you talk about these things like solar, battery, and if you stacked on a nat gas generator on top of that, doesn't make sense if you put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Probably not, but does it pay for when you do have blackouts? And
absolutely.
You look like the kingpin in the neighborhood when you're your own.
And hurricane parties are really fun.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that I'm coming to learn, because I've been spending a lot of time on power, we always talk about how crappy ERCOT is and all the problems it has. It's just a leading indicator. The other grids catch up 2 years later. So every problem we've seen in ERCOT over the last little bit, it's starting to creep in on the other grids.
Yeah. Stacks 80% coal, natural gas, and nuclear.
You're retiring way more coal than you think you are. And you used to be at 15% excess generating capacity. You're at about 2 right now.
Hey, Chuck,
So
Mark,
They're teaching.
Trending the wrong way.
They're having power seminars at Uchi. I got to catch up here.
Mark lives in South Dallas. So, it's
Next
too
time
far
I catch
from,
a Southwest flight out to your house, Mark, we'll talk that.
There's a guy following Twitter that's
then-
always talking about the woodlands of South Dallas, and I just like him every time he has that comment.
Rounding out the show, do y'all have finger of the week?
I have the finger of the week. This week's finger of the week goes to brain cancer. This past weekend was the 10th anniversary of the passing of James Broach. James Broach was the most amazing human being that has ever graced the energy business. I hired him out of school. He worked for me for, call it 12 out of his 15 professional years. Literally the best person on the planet. And the biggest compliment I can give to him, and it's so true, is you always wanted to be a better person when you were around him. And I'm a shit, and I don't feel that with many people at all, but I always felt it with James. And if you look at brain cancer, unfortunately, it's always terminal. The standard of care hasn't improved in the last 30 years. Survivability rates have gone up like a month. And it just doesn't happen to enough people, so there's not enough in the way of dollars to do research there. That being said, Dr. Lang at MD Anderson's doing a lot of amazing work there to advance the cause. And it's not just James. It took Ken Peake from us, who was CEO of Contango. It took Holly Hardy from us, who was in charge of energy investing at Rice. And it's just a really shitty disease. So finger of the week's not even a strong enough term to use, but fuck you, brain cancer.
It's a good finger of the week.
Amen.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right, guys. Well, it was good to have everyone back in the studio. I'm glad that Mark's presence can be felt. Mark's going to...
Kirk and I will be anxiously watching ratings this week.
I'm going to go pump this one. All right. If y'all enjoyed the show, make sure to share it with a friend, and we will catch y'all next week.